Coming up on Mount Hermeneutics, the Satanic Panic. See, you have to understand that way back in ancient times, in like 1970s, 80's, and 90's, we had these cults that did these crazy rituals and they, hurt virgins and children. And if it wasn't for like a pack of Christian conservatives, we'd probably still be under their spell. So we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more. So keep it right here. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck. Maybe he's a great guy. Who knows?
He is a great
guy.
But
on this, asshole.
Are you left-handed?
I am permanently now, but
sorry.
Yes, I'm quite proud of myself, if you can't tell.
Fellas, what is happening?
That intro was so pregnant with irony that
I think I was gonna say well, that's a take, and we'll probably have another.
Yeah.
So good. I got to put it in anyway because there it is.
All right. Well, that'll come up. That'll come up as we get into it.
That's right. The week that was. First of all, I want to ask you to go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and share the show with your friends. We're doing well. We're having fun, and if you like this content, we're gonna put out a lot more.
So our downloads on the podcast side were over 1,000 downloads. So there's another milestone for us that we've hit. Yeah, I saw that today. I was getting last week's posted, and we were 1066 was the actual number. So thank you, everybody.
Look at this. Yeah, thank you.
Coming along.
Cheers,
Joe Rogan.
Yeah, Joe Rogan does that in like 5 minutes. It took us 5 months.
But hey,
well,
he doesn't have the compelling, hard-hitting, deep theological content like us. People shy away. If you're scared, you're scared. That's fine.
He appeals to the lowest common denominator. We're kind of like more highbrow, like if for refined, discerning podcast consumers, that's we're here for you.
Yeah, if Joe called me to be on his show, I wouldn't even accept.
I'd be like, why should we be on your show, Joe? Maybe if you have something to contribute, you can be on ours, but you're gonna have to sell us on it.
Right.
I'm just kidding, Joe. I know you're listening.
Call me Joe.
Mr. Rogan. I'm sorry, Mr. Rogan. We would do anything to be on your show. We have no dignity.
So, this weekend, Briar had her book signing.
How'd that go?
So the artist we know is Briar R. Rose with her own. It went well in her coffee shop. Of course, Delaney decorated it. It looked, like a Delaney show,
right?
In a coffee shop. A couple people stayed back. Her owner / manager. Shout out to Jason.
Nice.
And he stayed back, kept it open, got to purchase drinks and whatnot. I got to hang out with my brother and my son, and my brother's girlfriend's having a baby. She's due in a couple of weeks, so I'll have a new niece.
A niece. Is she named?
A new niece.
Has she been identified?
Iris Eve. Forgive me if I fucked that up. So
I like that name.
Iris. Yeah, that's gonna be a new niece. So fun stuff there. She signed a few books.
Very cool.
Got to read a couple of excerpts from her little poetry thing, and her AP English teacher showed up. So from high school, and
there you go.
And that was a fun little.
That's a little full circle kind of thing, right?
Right. Like, hey, this is one of my students, and
that's got to be validating.
She's published.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Because how many English teachers get to say their students went on to become poets?
Exactly, right? Like that's
that
the dream.
Just that one teacher. Yeah. She's the one that got to do that.
She's stunting all of her colleagues back at the schoolhouse now, right?
That's what I'm like. Hey, you see Cooper? And she's like, well, I never actually had Cooper for class. I'm like, you didn't have him for AP English? You don't say.
Uh-oh.
So yeah, that's funny. And Cooper's like, hey,
Right.
I went
He's like, hey,
I went to
wait.
college.
Oh,
She
that's right.
didn't.
Yeah.
I got
I
a degree,
mean, I
mug. What's up?
mean, I mean, there's
So,
that.
so he can flex a little bit
Yeah.
as well.
Coop,
So
Coop might be faculty soon, right? Like at a
that's
school.
right.
So there's a whole different weird circle
Yeah.
going on there.
So good stuff. He's doing well. He's coaching at a high school in Orange County and giving them all their speed training to include the football players, soccer players, all the athletic directors stuff. Come see Cooper to get faster. And
Nice.
that's pretty cool. You can get at me on Instagram, Super Dre. And Brian, what's up, man?
Hey, Dre. Well, I didn't have as exciting weekend as you did.
Okay.
You didn't
Recorded
suddenly have children that wrote books?
no, I did record a hip hop album.
That's
Dropped
what's
some
up.
beats.
Chasing Ben Shapiro.
I've been
Yeah,
waiting on
I
that.
figured. Yeah, I know, man. It's a dream we've all had for me to finally do my, drop some beats. Figured Ben Shapiro is taking off. Now is the time for nerdy conservative white guys to take over rap. So
I mean, that's who listens to it. So why not be the ones to actually
Right.
do it?
yeah.
It's 2024. Number one in hip hop is Ben Shapiro. The biggest name in football is Taylor Swift. We're on the verge of a civil war and World War III, and it's only January. So
I feel like you're kind of mocking my dream of being a world famous hip hop artist. But anyway, that's what I did. You can find me at the3rdhelix.com and look for my hip hop album wherever
Hip hop albums are sold.
hip hop albums are sold in the future. Just keep
Anywhere
looking.
you see a CD dude
might...
in a parking lot with his trunk open and he's trying to sell CDs, Brian's CD's probably in there.
And if you can't find it, it's coming. Just be patient. Matt, what's up with you, man?
Man, I made a quick run down to San Antonio this weekend. I hadn't been down in a while to see my dad. And my aunt, shout out Peggy, came across, she scored some tickets to the Spurs game and she kind of just did this, hey, is there any chance you want to come down to San Antonio? And I was like, yeah. So I was like, I need to come down and see my dad anyway. And this is a good excuse. So we jumped in the car and Austin and I went down there and they turned out to be sweet tickets for one of the minority owners at the Frost Stadium, as it's now called, Frost Arena. So the seats were amazing. The game was great until the last 3 minutes. And, it happens. It is what it is. They're young. They're learning. So, got down to San Antonio, saw the family, got to see a game, took my son. I'm not making any promises, but while we were there, my son was like, Dad, I think I'm just as big a Spurs fan as I am a Thunder fan. I was like, you want some gear? Let's go to the pro shop. He's not a sports gear kid, but yeah, so, we'll see what happens. There's still hope. Other than that, not a lot else going on. My wife's been doing some kind of remodel in her office, so the house is torn up, and that's what always happens when I leave town. So it's the usual. Other than that, everybody catch me at Matt Moore on Twitter, X, and yeah, let's get into the show. So Dre, we're talking about the great scare of the 80s. Huh? This is just like right after the commies, right? So we had the commies, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Satan. Is that kind of the chronology?
It's kind of during the commies were. I mean, they kind of coincided.
The commies are enduring, so they're.
I mean, the commies never really go away, do they?
Right. I think there was like this weird, like coming together moment with all kinds of kindling with the boomers having kids or the that generation having the boomers. They growing up in this whole free love society. Right around the 60s, much of craziness happens, and then weird uptick in like 1969 of like these cult groups. Big headliner, the Manson family, right? So in 69, Sharon Tate, the pregnant lady, and the other 4 people that were in her house were murdered by the Manson family. A little while later, 2 other people get murdered. And of course, at that time in the 70s, following up, you've got a bunch of serial killers. the Zodiac killer starting in the late 60s and going through the 70s and never gets caught. So now
Boston
we're kind of
same time.
That was a little earlier, but
was it? Okay.
But yeah, John Wayne Gacy,
Menendez brothers.
Didn't they catch the Zodiac killer?
I don't think so.
Yeah, there's a movie. They caught him.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of movies, man. Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you have, these crazy cult factors, and then like the Zodiac give you iconography to kind of go with it. And I think what made that all kind of crazy is that there wasn't more serial killers in the 70s than there were throughout history, but the coverage of serial killers was super big, right? For example, Ted Bundy's the first trial that was like televised.
Is that right?
So you got this crazy demon guy like murdering people, and he's televised. We're seeing it every day, and then everything starts getting sensationalized. And once you learn that that's what ratings are made of, things kind of get sensationalized all the way. In 69 at the same time, also we talked about this in our Satan episode or Satanist episode. Anton LaVey comes out with his Satanic Bible. So now there's legitimacy because they have their own scripture.
They're a religion now. They're not
right.
Just
so they're a religion. So these cult people that gather together. But I think if all of that is the fuel, in 1980, a book came out called Michelle Remembers. And basically that's a book about a woman with repressed memories from when she was 5 years old. She starts to remember through therapy that she was handed over by her mother to a satanic cult. And just real quick, this is going to get into, this episode is going to get into sex, rapey stuff, child abuse, things of that nature. So if you're triggered by any of those types of things, maybe this episode isn't for you. And I think that we'll give it the reverence it deserves, but just saying that, molestation and child abuse in a ritual fashion, not that savory, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's probably fair to do that as a little advisory statement. And for anybody that maybe this is the first time listening to our show, we tend to be a little fast and loose with dark humor. So given that early statement, and if you know anything about us, you know that we don't take any of those issues lightly, although it might sound like we do later in this show. So just kind of take that with a grain of salt and kind of understand who we are. We're not condoning or admiring any of these kind of terrible behaviors.
So some of these memories that came up, Michelle Smith, she remembers being in a cult. Her mother handed her over, lots of sex orgy stuff, slaughtering of animals right in front of her. But what she really remembers is all the fetuses, all the dead babies. Just in every story that you hear about some of these cults, there's just dead babies all over the place. Like, this baby's dying.
That's really weird.
You have to eat the flesh of the baby because only Satan would do such a horrific thing, right? So what's kind of wild to me though is that, okay, so where are all these missing babies? Where's the reports of the missing babies?
Well,
is there an epidemic of thousands of babies gone missing?
How does a baby get reported missing if some teen mom didn't report that she was pregnant?
Or if some cultist was impregnated during an orgy.
Right.
Or
and there's
some victim of ritual abuse was...
you deliver your own baby and it becomes sacrificed.
Teen runs away from home, gets into some bad spots, ends up pregnant, doesn't want to go home, tell their parents, so she hangs out until...
So that's an interesting take, because anytime you hear about the detractors, they'll always come up like, there's no evidence for any of this stuff that's being said. There's a reason for that, right?
Right.
In your intro and for the past few minutes, it's raised several objections in my mind, but I wanted to let you finish before I got into it. So I don't want to cut you off or object prematurely. So I'll let you.
Brian, you suffer from premature objection?
So
I heard it as it was
as you were saying it. Yeah.
And I knew that was, I teed it up.
It happens to all of us, Brian, from time to
so
time.
for you people, this is exactly what Matt was talking about. This is so if this is your first time here, this is what we say. This is what we do. So with that in 1980, that book coming out, of course, in the doctor, his name was Larry Pazner, and he helped Michelle write this. Okay, there goes my light. It is gone. So hopefully you can still see me.
It's the devil. The devil doesn't want you to keep talking.
Right. Devil didn't like that at all. Like, hey, Dark Prince, my bad.
Go talk to him directly.
Actually, fuck you. Let's fight. I got Charlie Daniels on my side. Wow. Okay.
It's pretty funny.
So,
I don't go picking fights with the devil.
They go on tour. Like, the book was debunked like really early, or there was lots of objections to it, of course, because just repressed memory therapy is kind of a whack science,
borderline kind of
right.
It's fringy science,
right?
Yeah.
Is it pseudoscience because the method of recovering the memories is in question, or because the reality of repressed memories is in question?
I would think the former rather than the latter.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Well, I mean, I guess the question is, have they ever done a clinical analysis to be like, hey, we already know you should know this, but you don't, so we're going to go try to pull it out. And then if it works, then we know it worked. And I mean, when you're working from an unknown deck of cards, and you say, I'm gonna do a magic trick and pull a card out of the middle.
Well,
in this book, how they got it, he recorded all the sessions. So sometimes for like hours a day, all of it was recorded, and then all the recordings were written down into a narrative for the book.
Yeah.
There was a third party like secretary who put the tapes together and edited some of them, and she believes something happened to Michelle because she was there for all of the things.
Yeah.
And a lot of times things are pretty sensationalized, and even if a fraction of the things actually happened to her or about her, then already we're talking about some criminality that's pretty jacked up.
Yeah. And just, I want to disclaimer this with, I have done zero research on this. I'm just responding to what I'm hearing in the moment. I think that repressed memories have been discredited as evidence in a courtroom,
right?
Because a lot of, like, it's the way it was used was that, say there's a divorce case happening, and the mom wants to screw the dad by claiming he sexually abused their kid, and so she hires a shrink to do this therapy
to extract very specific things.
They ask all these kind of leading questions, and instead of uncovering repressed memories, what they wind up doing, maybe with bad intention, maybe completely innocently, but what they wind up doing is planting the memories in the person,
right?
And so it's become discredited as courtroom evidence. But
I mean, it's a detective tactic when you're interrogating someone. That's a lot of false confessions get brought out exactly that way.
Yeah.
And in some of the cases that we'll be talking about, in the 80s, that's exactly what happened. Or the people that were imprisoned were later exonerated. Years later, people spent time in prison that perhaps didn't do anything wrong. I think the book got so much notoriety that all of a sudden they started going on book tours. They started going on like Sally Jesse Raphael and Maury Povich back in the day, some Phil Donahue, some Larry King.
I saw it on Oprah.
And then because they were talking about satanic cults, she needed to be exorcised from all of the trauma. So she got to go to the Vatican with her doctor, and the Catholic Church was way involved in everything that
really.
Yeah, so that lended more credibility to their story.
Well,
and then they became experts in the occult and were also consultants on cases across the country as the Satanic Panic kind of works its way across the country, and all these cases come out. They're consultants on it, and they made a little bit of money. And then come to find out, both of them were married, but ended up marrying each other. And there was some, some
so there was
some confidentiality, some lines that were crossed there
conflict of interest. Yeah,
during the therapies, if you will.
Sounds like
I'm
there
sure,
was some satanic,
I'm sure he was making her feel better.
There was some satanic
So,
panic trauma bonding going on or something.
Yeah, a little bit.
I see what you're saying, Dre.
So when that book comes out in 1980, it becomes really big. And then in 1983, Manhattan Beach, California, um, uh, the McMartin preschool. There was kind of a prominent preschool in the area at that time. And one of the students there had trouble with bowel movements. And his mother questioned him on it.
Oh, no.
And then accused one of the teachers, Mr. Buckley, of abusing him. Nice. So because Mr. Buckley was brought in, he was questioned. They didn't have enough evidence to keep him. They let him go, but the police department believed that it was in the parents' best interest to know that this was going on at that school. So a little memo goes out to all of the parents at that school. So next thing you know, all the parents are asking all their kids the thing.
And now they're seeding potentially.
Now they are.
I see where you're going with
so
that,
then and then you have therapists coming in with puppets, little Muppets, like, what happens when you did where did they touch you, little girl?
Is that where those
that's where the word
came
from? Show me on the doll where he touched you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That comes from the McMartin trials from in 19. The trial started in 1984. What's kind of significant about these trials is that they ran all the way through to 1987 before they were found innocent, but a hung jury on like 13 more counts. So then it continued on until 1990, and to this day, it's the most expensive, civil trial in American history.
To include the OJ trial?
To include the OJ trial, because the OJ trial was quick, pretty much. It took a while to get started, but once it got rolling, it was. But when we were talking about 1984 to 1990,
yeah,
right, and there's in the whole time,
and a lot of kids, a lot of parents, right, a lot of money, a lot of individual cases, yeah.
So some of the accusations from the kids were there were secret tunnels, they were flushed down the toilet, Chuck Norris came, the teachers were flying on broomsticks, a lot of things that are just not credible at all, right? So
Chuck Norris could have been there.
Chuck Norris could have been there.
That's about the only thing that could have happened.
Right. I'm pretty sure they weren't flushed down the toilet. And then, lots of suggestive, we played naked games. And then it came out later that a lot of kids denied lots of things, but the questions just kept coming. So they learned real quick that if I just tell the adult,
they'll leave them alone and they'll stop getting badgered.
I'll stop getting these questions. And these kids, I'm talking about like from 2 years old to 4 years old. And through the trial, we're talking about people taking a stand, they're 9 years old. Right. So wow, how easy would it be to manipulate those children? Also in like the 80s, Dan and Pam Keller, another preschool incident, blamed for those things. They went to prison for like 20 years. They're both out now. 20 years. They were sentenced to 40.
Yikes.
But there was another thread at the same time. In 1979, there was a super popular game called Dungeons and Dragons, right? So
I've heard of that.
Maybe you've heard of it. One of the big cases early was a kid named James Dallas Egbert, who went to Michigan State. He was only 16 years old, so he's a prodigy in like computer science, and he started feeling senses of loneliness and isolation. He was young, so he started doing drugs, drinking alcohol. Right. And then he started hanging out in like the utility tunnels at Michigan State. Well,
I say that without judgment as a nerdy child. So
right, I mean, Dungeons and Dragons, I didn't really play Dungeons and Dragons because I preferred the Marvel version. TSR had another game with Marvel heroes, and to me that was just more my speed than medieval dudes and wizards. And my wizards come with fucking X-Men. You understand? I don't need no wizard casting spells. I need Professor X.
I spent hours with that with friends. We rarely played it. We just spent the whole time
Creating characters,
trying to top each other's characters.
And arguing about the rules.
Right. And I'm Beyonder. I have all the powers.
Right,
That's not fair. You can't be a Beyonder.
I am beyond. So, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted the world to know my experience with Marvel role-playing games.
So this guy ends up committing suicide, and it looks like he was also trying to deal with his suspected homosexuality. So we have a strong Christian family. This guy's only 16, super brilliant, has some depression problems, goes to college, has some troubles, ends up killing himself in 1980. This is the real life case of the book Mazes and Monsters. And then of course that was turned into a movie that was Tom Hanks' first leading role. And in that movie, everyone that played Dungeons and Dragons were some weird kid that couldn't separate the life of your character and your real life, and it just kind of took some artistic liberties on people that played Dungeons and Dragons. And then there was a young man by the name of Irving Pulling, who apparently was also perhaps homosexual, and his uber Christian family, and he ended up shooting himself in the chest in his front yard. And his mother Patricia started an organization called BAD, Bothered Against Dungeons and Dragons. So the only thing that these two had in common, other than all the suicidal stuff, one of the threads was they played Dungeons and Dragons. Never was there an issue with Dungeons and Dragons, but they played it, and it talks about spells. Patricia ended up suing the principal of the school because he allowed them to play Dungeons and Dragons. Basically, it was a community outreach program that, hey, they played Monopoly, they played Dungeons and Dragons. I guess he cast a spell on one of Irving's characters, and she believed that it was a real spell that he cast on him, and so therefore she sued them. That got thrown out.
Was he like a level 10 mage? How did he do that?
Maybe so. She sued TSR. That got thrown out. And then she sued the publishers who released the books from TSR. That got thrown out. So then she starts this organization. Now it's crazy because if you look at a lot of the media and a lot of the quotes and the stats that come out from that time that the media just pumps, they're all quotes from BAD.
Really?
This organization that just says, they conflate numbers about suicides and teenagers and people that play D&D. Fun fact, D&D players actually commit less suicide than normal kids. And it might have something to do with actually having friends.
I like how you categorize normal kids and then D&D players.
D&D players and then the fucking normal kids.
Yeah, this reminds me of the seduction of the innocent comic book scare of the 1950s. Are you familiar with that?
Same thing, yeah.
Like the writer of this book, Seduction of the Innocent, he interviewed all the kids who were in juvenile detention, and because they had all read comic books, he concluded, therefore, comic books contribute to juvenile delinquency.
Okay, yeah.
And Congress held hearings about this. It was like the comics industry was afraid they were going to get banned, so they came up with the Comics Code Authority, and I'm not going to go into the whole story here, but it's a really fascinating story about how this book and these congressional hearings and this moral panic over comic books kind of created pop culture as we know it, because of the Comics Code Authority. But, had Frederick Wertham thought to, or maybe he did think, but he was just a liar, had he thought to interview kids who didn't go to juvenile detention, he would have found that they too read comic books,
right?
And that
that's a pretty bad causation correlation.
Music, the same thing, right? Elvis and his pelvis couldn't be on TV.
So
and then at this time, that's when thrash metal starts.
So I can speak to a lot of this personally, right? So 81, 82. I don't know if it was 81 or 82. But I remember this in my childhood. I told this, we talked about our childhood. I moved a lot as a kid. So it's easy for me to isolate a year based on where I was living because I only lived there for like 6 to 9 months. I didn't go to the
I got the same thing going on.
I didn't go to the same school for an entire school year of my entire life until 10th grade. So anyway, I remember I was living in College Station, Texas, and we lived in this area. It was like a four tenant condo townhome kind of apartment setup. And my neighbor next door was my age. I was 6. And again, I was young. I was first grade. And his older brother played D&D. But his older brother was like 12. Right. So we weren't even teenagers. We were just little kids. And we kind of just played out in the yard. We go next door and play with each other. And same like you guys mentioned, we were messing around. We were just we could barely read. Right. So we're like reading rule books and we don't even really understand what we're doing. I think I
barely read and you're already communing with the devil.
I think we played like 2 instances of actually rolling dice and doing something. I remember my level 1 character died and I was beside myself.
Well, they talk about people, when their character dies in the game,
they go kill themselves.
Then they have to go kill themselves.
Yeah, like death packs and all that.
I'm like, I died every time I played. Like, I'd be dead so many times.
But so the scare happened, right? And I remember I had gone to a store and they were just starting to make action figures, D&D action figures,
right.
And I had one. I got my first one. I was all excited about it, and I wanted to go show my friends and all that, right? And then this started, and I wasn't old enough to be socially aware of how it got to my mother, but in some capacity my mom was made aware of this risk. And fairness to my mom, she's a young, I'm the oldest, right? So my mom was a whopping 22. I was 6. She was 28, 29, right? So it's not like she was this wizened 40 something 50-year-old mother. She's this young mother, and she hears probably at church or from some of the other mothers, "Hey, don't let your kids play D&D. It's the devil." And she was like, "I think I heard my son talking about D&D." So she comes in and she's like, "Hey, you've been playing D&D?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's awesome." And she's like, "Yeah, no." And I was like, what do you mean?" And so like I couldn't play with him anymore. I couldn't go next door to the kid's house. She took my little toy, threw it away. I had this like personal experience of just being told I couldn't do it all of a sudden. And then Dre, you might have been about to jump into the music part, but then fast forward like 2 years later, I'm going to this church here in Oklahoma City. It was my mom's, her family's church. And I remember they made us watch this video that was being sent out to all the other churches, right? And it was talking about how there's satanic undertones embedded into the songs in reverse, that you have to play the records backwards. And they say all of these evil demonic incantations and whatnot. And it's weird. So I grew up with this aversion to rock and roll because of that. And part of it was, I guess I was young enough to just assume that it was accurate. And then there was another part of me that thought, even if it's not, what if maybe one dude is actually doing these things that they're accusing the entire genre of doing, right? So I was like, hey, better safe than sorry. Kind of like, Brian, you made the joke a minute ago, you don't openly address the devil and take him on. I was like, why listen to music that might unintentionally commune with the devil? I'll just be safe and listen to gangster rap because they don't like the devil either, right?
Which is probably more accurate of the devil.
I mean, have you guys ever tested that though?
Yes, of course I did. Like as I got older, right? Like I would take an album and spin them backwards, and like you go to the usual suspects: Kiss, Motley Crue, and
Stairway to Heaven.
But you gotta go with Sabbath and
well, so hang on. So
okay,
but you gotta remember, right? Like so Kiss,
Maiden.
like Kiss, Motley Crue, because Motley Crue they will say that they're one of the first ones to adopt the evil demonic flavor, right?
Not even close. Yeah.
Well, so they have pentagrams in their imagery,
right?
And the urban legend, and I still remember this to this day, is that Motley Crue stands for Mothers Ought to Let Every Young Child Rule Under Evil. That's what
that's
Motley
right.
Crue stands for. That was
Right.
the letters, right?
Like AC/DC was Antichrist, Devil Christ.
Is that true, or is that just the rumor you heard?
It was a rumor, but Motley Crue leaned into it,
right?
Because it made them edgy and cool with teenagers. Because
Streisand effect.
Right. That's who your target audience is, right? Kiss's letter stood for the Knights in Satan's Service, right? Like this was one of those things. And you know, it goes all the way into Saturday Night Live and the Church Lady, right? So then it became a caricature. Could it be the Satan, right? So it went from being something that was like a genuine thing that everybody thought was just rampant. So I grew up in this, you know, Southern Baptist Methodist mixture, very religious home life, where my mother was desperately concerned that I was doing battle with the devil on a daily basis at elementary school. This was the reality that I grew up in. So it was definitely a real thing from a social point of view. Like whether or not it was real from a risk factor or that was those undertones were accurate, I don't know. I don't think they were, but you know, as we've talked about on this show, the reality of the supernatural warfare that's going on is a real thing. Did it manifest in the voice of, you know, Gene Simmons and you know, these guys that, you know, aren't even considered heavy metal by today's standards when it comes to music? And that's kind of a funny thing also. Quick, the last thing I want to throw out, this is a quick little side story. So I've grown into becoming a fan of metal music as I've gotten older and learned to play guitar and whatever. And Carrie and I went to a Motley Crue concert 6 months ago. And
you saw boobs in the wild.
It was a very traditional Motley Crue concert, right? But I was aggravated because I wanted a shirt. I wanted some merch. I wanted a cool old school Motley Crue shirt, and they didn't have one damn shirt that didn't have a pentagram on it. Like Motley Crue is not a Satanist group, but this was their imagery from back in the day. They're still trying to be edgy and cool.
But I'm not going to wear that.
Of course, they know what it means. Like, and they're going to
do they? I don't think most people know what it means.
I don't know that I've ever met anybody that doesn't know what a pentagram is.
Do you know what a pentagram? Like, do you know why that's a satanic symbol?
I could tell you why I was told it's a satanic symbol. Again, there's the truth, and then there's what is accepted as the reason, right?
I don't think it matters. I think that if you know that it is a satanic symbol, right? Like Anton LaVey didn't believe in Satan, but you know, he's
right. I mean, I'm aware that you can go back far enough and you can make you can make a swastika not evil, and you can make
pentagrams,
and you can explain that pentagrams are actually Christian, right? If you go back far enough with the imagery, but the point is how it's being used and the intent behind it, right? So, like, I'm not buying a T-shirt as a 46-year-old grown Christian metalhead. I'm not wearing a pentagram on a shirt, like even ironically, right? Like I'm just not doing it. So
I'm just alluding to a point that I'll explain later.
Yeah, but that's fine. But yeah, so to sum all of my little part up, I'm just pissed I don't have a Motley Crue shirt.
Yeah, that is BS.
It's annoying, right? I paid money for the tickets, and I wanted the T-shirt because I
want to spend $60 for a T-shirt, and you didn't even have one I can wear.
Right?
Stupid satanic panic kept you from getting a T-shirt,
and then Motley Crue being idiots and not letting go of it because they think it's still cool that they were part of it. And I actually saw that in an interview where it was Nikki Sixx talking about it. And he was like, yeah, we were one of the first ones to lean into it. It was freaking cool, man. The kids thought it was cool, and it packed our shows.
It's funny. I had such an opposite experience growing up.
Yeah.
Like my parents didn't screen anything I consumed. I was into ninjas, and like my mom would give me ninja movies, and then I'd be watching them. I'd be watching with my stepdad, and my mom would walk into the room and like, why is he killing people?
Because he's a ninja.
Then my stepdad's like, that's a ninja. He's a Japanese assassin. And she's like, why do you like that so much? I'm like, I don't know, it's cool. It's cool. But that was the extent of the screening of my media content. But I remember when I was in like the third grade, like one of my best friends at school, I'm like, hey, you want to come over and come over after school and
Do
watch
karate.
cartoons or something, do karate. And he's like, I don't know, what kind of cartoons do you watch? And I'm like, I don't know, same stuff everybody watch. He's like, do you watch Thundercats? I'm like, hell yeah, I watch Thundercats.
Thundercats is awesome.
Well, why wouldn't I watch? What kind of a loser doesn't watch Thundercats? He's like, I can't watch Thundercats, it's satanic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, isn't there a character that invokes the ancient spirits of evil? I'm like, yeah, but he's the bad guy. Like, you're not supposed to root for him. And
Yeah, but if you have a friend come over and he's rooting for Mumra, you're like, you got to go, man. Like,
yeah.
Which is kind of the point about Dungeons and Dragons, right? Because there are bad characters in it, but you're playing a bad character, and then usually the good guys, it is still good versus evil, and you're trying to. It's like,
I don't know if I agree with that though. So I have to nerd out for a second, right? So one of the differences with Dungeons and Dragons was they had this whole your alignment, and
yes,
but you could be a good guy in the sense of you can go with your friends to kill the evil dragon, even though your alignment is evil. As long as you act evil throughout the course of doing the good thing, you can ultimately do the good thing if you can articulate that you're doing it for bad reasons. And you get bonus points at the end for being able to explain how all of your actions align to the way you were supposed to act.
but how is that different than playing, say,
Grand Theft Auto?
No, not even that, but Axis and Allies, right? A board game where you are Germany trying to conquer the world.
Right. Or just acting in a school production of a Shakespearean play where you play the villain.
Yeah. It's not different in my opinion. I think the problem is, we've talked on this show about how, things happen that are the first time, right? Like, the first time the internet, the first time this. And I think D&D and the satanic panic, metal music and all of that, it was the first time. And now in hindsight of having raised a couple of kids and knowing what it was like being a parent, not having the secret playbook didn't get mailed to me. So I didn't know what I was doing at the whole time I was being a parent. Like, I get that, these parents were reacting the same way and not knowing what to do. I think the funny thing is, I think the next generation was wildly more jaded about those kinds of things, maybe in an over rotation in the other direction, right? So the way the world has changed, my son doesn't currently, that little group broke up, but there was an outcropping from his youth group at church, and they had Friday night D&D at the church. And it was like one of the youth leaders and a couple of the youth kids, and there was like 4 or 5 of them, and they would, they'd sit down. They had an ongoing campaign. And the first time when Austin was like, hey, I'm going to go play D&D. And I was like, where? And he goes, the church. And I was like, the what? But, that's how much the world changes. And I don't know that it's an over rotation. Now, someone's listening going, I can't believe the church would allow, okay, fine. Like that, that's a take.
I bet you got a gay, I bet you got a lesbian pastor, don't you?
but the reality is
he doesn't have a lesbian pastor, just for the person saying that.
We've talked about his pastor.
I mean, Brian might identify. I don't know. I'm just kidding. Brian, I know you don't. I have to edit that out.
I say that jokingly, but like as if it's, but it is conceivable that, I mean, there are a lot of so-called churches that have zero regard for the gospel or the truth of God, and zero reverence, where if D&D was outright satanic, they would have zero problem with that.
Correct. So, and what they saw it as was, this is a way to get some kids to hang out that, maybe they have nothing better to do on a Friday. Right. So that was kind of part of it. Right. So it's like, hey, these kids that have nothing else to do on Fridays, let's give them something social they can do where they can be in a safe, fun environment, and that's
where
worship the devil.
going with with the whole suicide thing, right? So most kids that commit suicides because they're isolated, it's because they're, they got nowhere to turn, it's because they're lonely, it's because they've been bullied.
Right.
If you have a group of friends, normally you have a pack, you have your pack, your tribe, suicide's not as big of a thing.
Right.
So
look at that, the famous series of Stranger Things, right? Those kids,
right,
the stars of the show would be considered the outcasts of a school,
right.
but because they had this common game to play together, they had the reason to get together, and they looked forward to it.
Season 4 goes big into the satanic panic.
It does.
And it
Okay.
trained them to wait. What was that? What leans into it?
He said season 4 went big into the satanic panic. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
With the Metallica music.
Those seasons are so far apart. Music. I never remember what happens in them. But there's also like what I call the lawn dart syndrome. Are you familiar with this?
I played lawn darts. They were awesome.
Yeah,
especially when you just throw it straight up in the air and hope to not die.
Yeah, somebody got impaled on a lawn dart, and so their grieving parents, which is understandable. It was a horrible tragedy. They blamed the lawn darts and the existence of lawn darts for their child's death. So they crusaded to get them banned, and they succeeded. And it's kind of like, it's an understandable response to grief.
That's exactly what this Patricia Pulling did, right?
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have any self-reflection on why her son might have killed himself, but instead she blamed Dungeons and Dragons and then made up a bunch of stuff and went on tour.
Hang on though. Hang on. I got to push back. Lawn darts was a really damn bad idea.
Well, okay.
There's an age limit on lawn darts. You should be supervised.
I understand.
That's fair. That's
like saying you shouldn't have a
pellet gun or something. That's fair.
Right,
that's fair.
Yeah, and there is this natural response when you lose somebody that you love and you're grieving. You want to kind of redeem it. You want to bring some good out of it, and make it so they don't die in vain. Believe that you brought some greater good out of it. And that's understandable, but often it's not the thing you're blaming's fault.
No, you're 100% right.
And you'll shoot your eye out, kid.
And you want to, there's the extra appeal of, well, it's not because of anything we did. It's not because of it's not because I neglected my child, and
it's not because I gave my child these deadly pieces of steel and then sent him out into the yard unsupervised.
Right.
It's Hasbro's fault. That's a fair point.
Yeah. Or my kid who killed himself, and also happened to be in Dungeons and Dragons, couldn't possibly be because I didn't pay attention, because I was too busy to care about the warning signs, or because
I was drinking my gin martinis and smoking my Pall Malls
what kind of a stereotype mom are you talking about from the 80s there?
It's the D&D's fault, not mine. And so we're going to crusade against that.
I mean, obviously it's the devil. Without the devil, my kid would be, a Pulitzer Prize winner today.
So we're mocking that though. But I think, and I don't know if you guys want to talk about this some more, but I do want to address like the question of the reality of satanic ritual abuse, because I don't know that we can. It seems like Dre, the way that you framed it, Dre, that it seemed like you were suggesting that it was driven by social, the panic itself was driven by social forces and not by any actual reality of satanic ritual abuse.
I think that the panic itself, the moral panic that became an outrage, was based on nonsense, because the stuff that was really happening, or things that are real, was happening all around them the whole time. And then all of a sudden in the 80s, we're just gonna read a book that's probably trash, more than likely trash, been debunked, and people have recanted stories over and over, and then it hides. It's like really good cover for someone who wants to do evil things. I mean, we did a whole episode on the Sound of Freedom. There are children being trafficked. There are young runaways that end up in horrible situations. Now, are all of that, done with some kind of satanic ritual where they cut you open and bleed the virgin and drink probably not. But to me, if you sell a child and you do any kind of sexual abuse with a child, you are working for the fucking devil. And that's in my mind, that's 100% true. To
Whether
me,
you know it or not, right?
That is what
Whether
actual Satanism is.
Right.
Right. It's not about some ritualistic being edgy and cool like the Church of Satan that we talked about, a few weeks back. This is like actual evil that takes place.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
Right. They're not all going to dress up like the pagan people from Dragnet, right? And wear
right.
the ram's heads and all that kind of stuff. But whether I think, and I said it, I don't know that I was kind of talking over the top of you, but it's one of those things. Satanism doesn't have to be intentional or knowingly satanic in order to be satanic, right? Evil is evil, irrespective of the name that you put on it or the reason behind why you're doing it. The outcome is evil, and that's kind of a binary thing. Before we move on, because I think we're about to move on quickly, before we pass on the lawn darts story, I got to tell a quick John story. So my brother John, who's listening, and you guys will see him, ask him about the scar that's on his scalp, because my brother, when he was he must have been 10, played improvised lawn darts with a tire iron, the kind that just, the long with the nut driver on the one side and then the big screwdriver head on the other side. Yeah. And he was throwing that up in the air and sticking it into the ground, and he threw it up and watched it until it hit him right in the head.
He got a good view.
Split his head open. He's bleeding all over the place.
So why would we ask him about it now if we have the story?
Well, because he's got the scar. He remembers it. He probably tells it better because from his firsthand view of doing it. I don't know, but like lawn darts weren't dangerous because they were called lawn darts, right? Like kids just throwing shit up in the air and watching it fall was happening all over the place.
I had a bow and arrow set, and it was great fun. Me and my friends would fire it straight up in the air and see who could not die.
Hey, good job not dying.
We used to throw rocks at each other, just like,
and that's why I don't have any childhood friends to talk about.
You're weak. you're a bitch. Don't move. I'm throwing this rock all the way across the street as high as I can, and if it hits you, hey, don't. If you move, then you lose, right? So
that reminds me of some grunts in 29 Palm who were playing Dodge Rock after 6
Gen
hours.
X, baby.
Yeah, right. We used to have BB gun fights.
Yes,
those are the best.
Yeah, shoot right out, kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then that means you suck.
Not if I shoot you first.
That's right.
So getting back to seriousness a little bit. So we're talking about the, hiding. I think you were alluding to hide in plain sight, right? Like, so Brian, you asked Ray, do you think, the stuff that's actually happening or not? And he said no, but that doesn't mean other things weren't happening. If we were to jump to little bit more modern era, right? There was that Pizzagate thing. And
before we get to that though, and I want to get into that, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think we might be getting ahead of ourselves. I did mean to interrupt you, but it was for a good cause. Like I recognize I'm being rude and interrupting you, but what I have to say is more important than what you have to say.
Right.
At least right now.
We'll probably get
at least right now
because it is more contemporary. So it's probably going to be a little bit a later topic, but put a pin in that, Matt.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll put a pin in it.
I love where you're going, by the way. I love where you're going.
Yeah. Black Bull.
Yes.
So I sent you guys that video of the 60 Minutes Australia from 1989 about I think it was entitled Satan's Children. And anybody listening, if you want to,
we'll stick it in the bottom.
You might be on YouTube right now, and don't stop listening to our podcast because this is better. But when you're done, search Satan's Children, 60 Minutes Australia in 1989. And by the way, 1989, this was back when actual journalism was still being done. Like, they didn't just outright lie to serve their ideology. Although it was at the pinnacle of the Satanic Panic, but he interviews a 15-year-old girl named Teresa who talks about how her mother left her with her grandmother in London when she, at the age of 2, and she details all of this abuse she suffered, where there were human sacrifices, there was gang rapes, and she was impregnated multiple times, and the fetus was aborted or brought to term and then sacrificed before her, and she was made to, I hate to even describe this stuff, but I mean, there was cannibalism. There were every bad, whatever bad things you can think of. This kid reported it, and she was, a 15-year-old girl who had been raised with her grandmother, and um, it sounds sensational and fantastic and unbelievable. Frankly, I like if somebody told me they had this childhood, I wouldn't believe them, but it's not something I'm rushing to believe, but they talked to investigators who talked to other children who reported the same things, like identical rituals, and they described details of the rituals. And it doesn't sound like the kind of thing a kid would make up about an adult who raised them. 2, there were actual, like, prosecutions of a lot of the people involved. So this wasn't just, it wasn't just one kid talking. There were investigations and prosecutions, and did they prove every detail of it? Probably not. It's hard to go back to 1989 and research all of the details of this, but when you hear about stuff like this, of course we have a normalcy bias that tells us, that's so far out of our experience. Who would do that? What kind of a, like, you expect other people to have some kind of basic decency, where it goes against every fiber of their being to do that to a fellow human being, much less to children. And so we're not inclined to believe it, but at the same time, that's a wistfully naive view of humanity in general, if you absolutely rule it out as a possibility. And when you start questioning, well, why would we dismiss it? And there was evidence for it. There were prosecutions. There were actual, publicly documented court cases involving a lot of these things. So I don't know that we can rule it out entirely, but if we do, why would we? Like, what do we know that tells us that can't happen?
Well, it's tough because I'm listing other prosecutions and people that spent prison time on something that it was proven not to be true. I think what got me into the Satanic Panic at all is about 10 years ago, I guess. There's a movie called The Devil's Knot that came out starring Reese Witherspoon and Colin Firth. And it was a telling of a true story of the West Memphis Three. And there was 3 little boys that were all 8 or 9 years old that played in this area in West Memphis, and they were murdered. And the 3 teenage boys that were put on trial for this murder because they were accused of being some occultists that did rituals in the woods, and that they clearly ritualistically murdered these 3 boys. And the only evidence they had was he wore black shirts and painted his nails black, and he really liked Metallica.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So it was weird. It was crazy because in 1993, HBO had a documentary on it, but it was actually, I guess whenever the trial was, in 95, 96, they filmed the inside of the courtroom. So the director of this documentary, Paradise Lost, basically he was doing a feature on, teenage problems and teenage, are teenagers able to be evil? So he found this case, went down there at basically the tail end of the Satanic Panic down there in Arkansas, and then the more he filmed, the more he interviewed people, the more testimony that was put on tape, the more he realized that these boys weren't guilty.
Can I pause you for a second?
For sure.
In the box. In the box, come on. I'm sorry.
So
before we get started back,
be,
just as an aside, tomato meter 26%, audience score 39% for The Devil's Knot.
Yeah, because the film wasn't as good as, say, the documentary,
the real story. Yeah,
the real story. Yeah,
yeah.
Which got me searching. I'm like, "What? This is a true story? What the hell?" And I went back and I started reading the case, right? And I've seen a couple of documentaries on it. I've seen a couple of podcasts that review it, and it's like, man. And then of course there's the whole internet thing where it released Damien Eccles. I mean, this guy got the death penalty, man. He got the death penalty, and it was only because he was a troubled teen that his girlfriend's mom didn't like him. So, and it's one of these investigators who was trained during the Michelle Remembers period, where police officers.
Hey, get in the box. Get in the box. Come on. What are you doing? Get in the box. I'm so sorry. We'll just that's gonna be like nearly impossible to edit. Probably
where
just
they started running seminars and training to police departments, people in school, corporations were doing these trainings, how to recognize Satan in your organization. So there was a parole officer down there in West Memphis who dealt with teen delinquency and people that had been to like jail. Well, he noticed that that one of the kids he had to be a ringleader, and he clearly believed in Satan. And it turns out the kid was actually Wiccan, right? So, and he said, "Yeah, I'm Wiccan, but I don't sacrifice anything. I don't believe. I'm not a Satan worshiper. I like nature."
Mm.
So, but because he admitted to being a Wiccan, all the people down in Arkansas, jury your peers, right? They like, no, you're clearly a Satanist.
In Arkansas at that time, that's the same thing.
Right. And what was also crazy too is some of the forensics they found on the boys, right? They were tied up with shoestrings, their genitalia was missing. It was, there was cut with a serrated blade, lots of details that kind of didn't fit the narrative that they were saying. For example, they say, well, these genitals were bitten off in some ritual ceremony, when really perhaps it's the snapping turtles that's down in the pond there that probably ate them post-mortem.
Right.
There was no, you get crack freaking doctors that give their testimony and there's nobody to refute it, and the next thing we're putting these boys on trial, and convicting them. And one of the kids had like the IQ of a 9-year-old, even though he was 16 or 17. And it was same thing with the detectives asked him for 5 hours the same questions over and over again until finally he just admitted to killing them, and his two buddies are the ones that helped him. And that confession alone is what got them convicted.
Yeah, but
and Brian, I'm not saying that there's not cases or we can't be sure, but there are plenty of documented cases where people accuse someone of being a Satan cultist when this teenager from a fucking trailer park probably isn't in some kind of elite cult. And
you can say that about any crime or any, like, that's just bad police work. That's not.
But what I believe is because of trials like this in these kangaroo courts, that you really can go and do something, because no one's going to believe that it happened because of all these failings before. I said that a lot about like Donald Trump, right? People was like, I'm like, dude's not good, right? He's done. If you tell the truth about the things that my man says or does, you can probably convince people not to like him, right? But when you start sensationalizing and you start indicting him and all these things, and you start awarding women $83 million without a trial, and it wasn't even for the sexual assault. It was for defamation.
It was for defamation of character, right?
Because he,
But
said
for
out
saying,
loud,
I didn't rape
do
her.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
well, because he said I didn't rape her because she's ugly.
Yeah,
right.
Like,
which
like why would I rape
not,
her? I'm not even into her. She's disgusting. Kind of like you. I don't think you're attractive either. I wouldn't rape you.
Which is, yeah.
So to me, that kind of brings us to Pizzagate.
Well, but my point is that like none of what you described overturns the basic premise of the reality of satanic ritual abuse being a thing that happens sometimes.
It does when a lot of these people are convicted on memory and testimony.
Sure.
And eyewitness testimony is probably the worst evidence in almost every murder trial ever.
Well, but eyewitness testimony is also ultimately the primary evidence you have for anything. But we
we
can
now we have forensics, we have DNA,
sure,
we have
but
things other than eyewitness testimony, because eyewitness testimony puts people in prison falsely.
well, okay, but
almost every
Eyewitness
time.
testimony gets witches
yeah.
burned at the stake, right?
This
That's
is
right.
this is a broader top discussion about epistemology that like
Sure.
it's worthwhile for its own sake, but it might be a bit of a distraction. But my point is that, I mean, that bad police work, I mean, you've got dead bodies. Somebody was evil and depraved, killed them. So you've got that going on. It might not, in those particular cases, it might not have been satanic ritual abuse, but we also have we can also see plenty
And
of
by the way,
evidence.
satanic ritual abuse was coined by the author of Michelle Remembers.
Okay,
So
but
just giving it that name is from a guy who talked about repressed memories of someone in their 30s remembering when they were 5.
if you look up like the the Jeffrey Epstein stuff,
Sure.
the Harvey Weinstein stuff, the Westminster child abuse, the Westminster pedophile case, the Rotterdam sex trafficking case, like you do have plenty of precedent of a like when you do have these organized conspiracies to do evil, there is often a tendency among the authorities to look the other way. We've proven that that's a fact. And I think that's all the more the case with something like satanic ritual abuse, when it's already been sensationalized. It's already easy to kind of write off as fantasy and overblown. We don't need to pay attention to it. We don't need to take that seriously. And that provides a lot of cover for evil people to do evil stuff. And even if you don't believe the devil exists, it's not that far-fetched to believe that there are people who believe the devil exists and worship him. That's and a lot of them are they might have grown up listening to heavy metal, seeing these things glamorized and getting into them. Now, I don't think that listening to Motley Crue in itself turns you into a devil worshiper.
I have a question though.
Sure.
It's interesting to me that it's always the devil. When many of these cults that and there's a long list of them, even Jonestown, and there's a couple that just heard about, like a couple of like Black Hebrew Israelite cults that are out there. I forgot the specific name. I'm not trying to offend anybody who's that religion, but there was an actual cult. Oftentimes these cults, even Waco, right? They're Christian cults. They're some kind of serving thing, right? So when you hear that people are dressed in robes and wearing goats' heads and spilling blood and drinking it ritually, when there were actual cults with other crazy rituals of the occult that that are kind of with a Christian flavor or some kind of Muslim flavor to pour on top of that. I think when you add, kind of a brainwashing and religion and you mix them together, there is a potential for evil there.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we have to call it Satanism for it to be, people dying and raped and nonsense that goes on in
Yeah,
these cults.
I totally agree. But I mean, and that only supports my point. I mean, people will like but you see what people will do when they believe they're on the side of good, or at least they've convinced their
Sure.
followers they
To
are.
include Satanists.
Yeah.
Right. They believe they're on the side of good.
And people, well,
I
they
don't think
reject
Satanists do. Luciferians do. I don't think
well,
Satanists think they're on the side of good.
I think the people with that kind of a mindset, they look at things like the Branch Davidian cult, Jonestown, some abusive mainstream churches. I'm not
What's the
saying
latest
that by
one with
denomination.
Smallville girl? There was
Well, but that was
Nexium.
Nexium, but that wasn't a strictly speaking
Right. It was more like multi-level marketing
well,
where you like rape chicks.
it
It
was
was
a
like Beachbody cult. That's what that
it,
was.
it was a secular cult, but
Sure.
the people who look at the purportedly Christian cults,
It's
they
it's
think
let's bang an Amway. That's what that was.
they'll come to the conclusion that, well, God must not have much going for him if that's what his people do. So I'm going to go with the other guy.
Sure.
Because he offers more reward. And we've talked before about well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Well, let me just put it. I think I've said what I need to say about that. I think there's a lot of sensationalism, but I don't think that doesn't rule out that it happens, that is a thing that has happened. And again, to the listeners, if you're curious, just as a sample, look up that YouTube video I talked about from 60 Minutes Australia from 1989. But anyway, I don't want to dwell on that too much. Well, we can. You wanted to bring up Pizzagate, or
And I think what sucks is that kids get abused at schools all the time. In fact, people always, they shit on the Catholic Church for their child abuse.
yeah,
But statistically speaking, schools have more abuse than
yeah,
the Catholic Church does.
public schools, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
So these,
It's
so
always treated
I'll
as a
tell
local
you what I'm
story.
not saying. I'm not saying
Right.
don't listen to your children. I'm not saying
Right.
don't ask your kids questions. But
Don't ask them leading questions.
yeah. And actually this McMartin trial changed it changed actual laws on how you can interrogate people in California because of these kids, just
lead objection, leading the witness.
Yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah.
that didn't exist before then.
Right.
So that's
No, the only reason I was bringing up Pizzagate was it's just the natural progression of what we're talking about, right?
Fucking QAnon.
So there was this, I'm sure people listening are familiar with what Pizzagate was, but for anybody that didn't know, there was a urban legend, an internet conspiracy started by QAnon that suggested that there was a specific pizzeria in downtown Northern Virginia that was a underground conduit for a power circle that were essentially, abducting and trafficking children. To simplify, right? I don't want to get too specific because it's going to get someone's going to say that's not really what it was and blah blah blah. Simplified, it was supposedly a secret pathway to get into tunnels and whatnot to traffic children. And QAnon started this theory, and then this is where the early conspiracy theory around this DC elite that included Congress people and financiers and media moguls and heads of state. And this was all wildly frowned upon as a white supremacy conspiracy organization. And so this continued to get air, and there were supposed leaks. And it was constantly poo-pooed by the mainstream media. Hey, there's no proof. You guys are being silly. You guys are being racists. Stop it. Well, then this thing about Jeffrey Epstein came to pass, right? And lo and behold, 70% of the conspiracy theory was 100% accurate, right?
Can I offer some clarifying quibbles here?
Sure.
Do it.
Quibble.
Okay. Well, if you and I again, I did zero research for this. This is just kind of off the top of my head, but it's something we've talked about before. If you look at the early stages of the so-called Pizzagate conspiracy, like if you look at what people were saying on Twitter, what the actual substance of the so-called conspiracy theory was, it was that Washington elites were trafficking underage sex abuse victims, underage sex slaves. How old they were wasn't really. It was all kind of vague. Um, it was DC elites. It was happening in that area. As this went on, more and more details came out, and a lot of it was from like people with anonymous Twitter accounts with like 12 followers would add details like it's going through this place called Comet Pizza. They're Satan worshipers, and they have a sex dungeon in their basement where they chain children up and torture them, and that's where they hold them for their buyers to come and traffic them out and use them in their satanic rituals, and all of these fantastic details were added to what was otherwise pretty much not that well, maybe it depends on, mileages vary on what you consider sensational, but it was basically just Washington elites, sex with kids, trafficking. If there's organization, there's a lot of people involved, a lot of famous, powerful people involved. And then all the details were added about the sex dungeons and the Satanism and all this stuff. So finally, somebody decided to do something about it, went into Comet Pizza and shot the place up, killed a lot of people. And now the police got involved, of course, because there's dead bodies and they're investigating. It's a crime scene. As it turns out, there's no basement. And then the story was Pizzagate debunked. There's no basement. So that sensational detail about the satanic sex dungeon in the basement, that's been debunked. Pizzagate has been debunked. Now people invoke Pizzagate as kind of the prototypical like anti right-wing conspiracy. Anybody who voices any suspicion that the left is up to no good behind closed doors, oh, you're one of those Pizzagate conspiracy theorists. Yet we know from all the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, if you think he killed himself, you're a damn fool. I mean, I hate that we've turned it into a meme and we just laugh about it. The people who were responsible are probably perfectly fine with that because we stopped there, which is probably part of the plan. Just normalize it, make it a joke. People stop asking questions or pressuring them. They release that pressure by joking about it. But we know Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. We know that somebody had him killed because they knew the information he would let out would hurt a lot of powerful people. What did he have on them? There's something going on there. And also, if you look at the John Podesta email on WikiLeaks, I've poured through some of that. You don't have to necessarily go to WikiLeaks and pour through all of it. Just read some of the coverage of it. They were into some weird stuff. They were the WikiLeaks cache included a lot of imagery. I forget his brother, John Podesta's brother's name, but he's got a lot of bizarre, disturbing artwork in his home of like naked kids in bondage and contorted into weird positions. He has a coffee table with like sculptures of naked kids holding up. The guy is clearly has a preoccupation with naked kids. There's also significant discussion in these email exchanges between, and John Podesta, for those unfamiliar, he's in the Clinton inner circle. He's like one of Bill and Hillary Clinton's closest aides. He was involved in her campaign. he and his cohorts are into something called spirit cooking. There's this female artist, I forgot her name, but just Google John Podesta spirit cooking. Her name will come up. She's an outright Satanist.
You might want to use a anonymous browser when you Google those kinds of things.
Yeah. But John Podesta spirit cooking, the name of the artist will come up, and she's an out and about Satanist. Now, she might be a LaVeyan Satanist who says that she doesn't really believe in Satan, but it's just a mashup of Ayn Rand and Nietzsche with some Dungeons and Dragons theatrics thrown in. She might be an actual Satanist, but there are actual like rituals involved with her beliefs that the Podestas were involved in. And they talk about this in their email correspondences. There's also a preoccupation with cheese pizza in their emails. They're always talking about cheese pizza. Like there's one email where he mentioned somebody, either John Podesta or somebody writing to him, mentions you left a handkerchief at my house with a pizza related map. Now, nobody is that obsessed with cheese pizza. That's clearly coded language. According to the coverage you'll find, the theory is that cheese pizza, CP, stands for child pornography. This would fit in with a lot of what we know and is documented. So, the Pizzagate stuff, and once you start down that rabbit hole, it will darken your view of the world. But if I got to be this depressed and cynical all the time, I may as well have some company. But create a couple of categories for yourself. Write down get a piece of paper and with 2 columns and kind of collect all the stuff that's been publicly documented and you can verify, and the stuff that's sensational. And as Matt said, you're going to find that 70% of Pizzagate shouldn't really be controversial.
Yeah.
And if that's what we know about, imagine what we don't. So, yeah.
Was it last week with the Mug Club investigation?
Oh, yeah.
Rapey.su, which is kind of a dark web place to find child pornography. And one of the emails that was attached to that was an executive at BlackRock. So of course she, which is bizarre, right? When you hear about child abuse and child pornography, the word "she" normally doesn't pop up in your head, but yeah, every investigator, like, yeah, this email that was used in rapey.su is a attached to this woman, and then they deny it, and the lawyer does all this threatening. But I mean, this is a website that when you join, you have to submit child pornography before you're even allowed the secret knock, right? So that way everybody got you, right? So if you submit
mutually assured destruction kind of thing, you can't.
You gotta have skin in the game, literally, to join the club. And if there's elites that finally get caught, like who else is on SU? It used to be TO or dot whatever, because it has to keep moving around. But I mean, anybody who just thinks that that's something I need to type into my web browser, rapey dot fucking anything, probably has some issues and needs some help, or needs a bullet to their dome piece.
Well, the bullet would be help.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, those types of people aren't.
If I even had that thought,
they're not
recoverable.
Man. Those human beings aren't recoverable. I don't care what anybody says. Like you couldn't come to me, look me in the eyes, and say, "Hey, I used to be into child endangerment, but I've changed." It's like, no. That's that one's between you and God, and y'all can talk about it now.
My name's Paul. It's between y'all.
So, I like to believe that. I don't know, man. Like, I think if you cross the line, if I even had that thought in my head, I would make it my absolute priority in life to get help. And if they couldn't help me, then yeah, I would check out.
But that would take some self-awareness, which these people either have a ton of or fucking none of, right? So
yeah, if you cross that line, then your best thing you can do, the only redemption available to you is check out. Just stop ruining the world. You're not.
I agree.
All right. How do we move on from that? That's a
That's
dark
pretty
turn.
terrible. Yeah.
Um,
It's things that exist, and
yeah.
It's really easy because it's a Steven Crowder show. It's a show that's on Rumble. Quick to he's associated with Alex Jones, who has all these conspiracy
That was
things.
another one, right? So Alex Jones with his conspiracy around the evil Satanist cabal that exists within the U.S. government, right? Young Alex Jones, and then he goes out and follows them into the woods and literally videos them with a burning effigy to Moloch, and and he accosts one of the senators later the next day, and the guy's response was, "How dare you? You weren't supposed to be there." Never said that's not what happened, right?
Right.
It was a "how dare you" response, not a what? How'd you who are you? Prank caller.
Well,
Like, that
yeah.
wasn't the response.
Well, Alex Jones is really an interesting case because he has all of these things that he puts forward, and
Mm-hmm.
then finally when they hear one that's wrong that they can prove is wrong,
And they
they
hammered
quickly
him.
jump
Yes.
on that one, and
Yes.
therefore it discredits anything he's ever said.
So if you
And
ever say, "Hey, there's an Alex Jones episode," you get that look. Oh, you're a QAnon guy, aren't you? You're one of
right,
those whack job, right wing, conspiracy, racist, ultra nationalist. They start
right,
just tacking all of the words
right.
on it to disparage you to the point that you become,
we
uncredible.
have we have a normal.
Crowder's given Jones a platform, so he's part of his
Yeah.
mug club.
Oh, is that
and
right?
So
and
whenever Crowder comes up with something like this,
Well, Jones got
people.
his Twitter account back.
That's right.
and we have a normalcy bias. So anything that tells us that the world is not as we think it is, as it seems to be from our normal everyday experience, we have a bias against it. But as Christianity has died in the West, you do have people who are, you know, there's a vacuum of meaning and people want to fill it with something. And you have to wonder, like, why is somebody who devotes their life to politics, to seeking power and control over society?
That's a red flag to not vote for them. Anybody who
Well,
even runs.
but
It's a
but
red
you
flag.
have to wonder, well, what's in it? Well, like, what meaning is there in that? Like, you could not, if somebody offered me $1 billion to be president, like, you can be president, we're going to give you $1 billion. I'd be like, I don't know, man.
Give him my number.
You got you
Right. Yeah,
got
I'm
you
in.
got
I'm
you
in.
got you got 5 billion. Maybe I'll do it for 5 billion, but just $1 billion. Like, if you think, like, why would you even want that job? That's that's the question. And so, like, with Trump, I think it's pretty obvious. It's a game. He likes playing games and winning them. It's
My,
ego,
my man's
which is
transactional,
which
plain
is
and simple.
probably the most noble motivation we can find on in the field, other than Vivek Ramaswamy, who is unelectable because he has good ideas that would actually save the republic. But like, people who devote their lives to that, and what's in it for you? Why is that meaningful? And how do you? But and if you look at the World Economic Forum, that guy, I forgot the guy's name, the Sapiens guy. Um, um, that video of him talking about,
Harari.
yeah, that guy.
I
He
have his
makes
book
my
right here.
jaw drop. Like
He
when he talks, I'm like, what did he just say? Holy
Yeah. So
anti-humanist.
Brian's talking about this guy, and
Yeah.
we've mentioned the author in this book, and the funny thing,
Because his science is sound. So,
his anthropology is pretty solid, but he
right.
clearly has ulterior motives or extra angles that he's working with the other stuff that he's doing.
He is a nihilist who believes he is smarter than everybody else and should tell everybody else how to live and should set policy. And that describes a lot of these people. Like they don't believe
Bill
that they are,
Gates.
they don't believe that they are bound to the normal rules of good and evil.
Well, because in their world where there's only going to be, 10,000 people that survive, they're part of those 10,000, right? Because they're so important and so brilliant and so rich. So
what's the movie Don't Look Up? Have you seen it? Has everyone seen that?
Yeah, I was
that's exactly who these people are, right?
Yeah.
I watched that. Somebody who works in a marijuana dispensary as a gift gave me some edibles. I never tried it before, and I had the recommended dosage, and I watched that. So
you might need to watch it again. Is that what you're...
I didn't retain much of it. I was really in a, and by the way,
now you know how roughly a third of America operates on a daily basis, Brian.
I don't like it. Like I used to like my this is not on the subject, but I feel like I need to explain this to our listeners. I'm not a pothead.
It's the devil's lettuce, Brian.
I'm gonna take your Christian card now.
My thinking was that alcohol is perfectly permissible according to the Bible. Marijuana is a plant.
All the Lord's people said amen.
All the marijuana is a plant. It's not any different than tobacco. There isn't
not any different than tobacco, or
I could not make the biblical argument for why it should be forbidden according to scripture. So I didn't feel any qualm of conscience to try it. And I did, and now I don't know how that's addictive. It's not a good time.
It's not addictive scientifically. That's what they keep saying.
But why people want to, like, if somebody wanted to interrogate me or like get me to recant my faith or something, the way to do that would be to threaten me with
through gummy bears.
Like, all right, I'll tell you anything you know. Just do not make me ingest that shit ever again.
No, I mean, I would fight it. Like I'm not going to give up easily, but that would be like, you could punch me in the face or like waterboard me. That would not motivate me as much as threatening me with CBD or THC.
We might need to do an episode on marijuana. I think
we should.
In the Bible and Christians.
I got lots to say about it.
And the marijuana panic. That's another panic. There's satanic, and then there's the reefer madness.
Yep. I used to laugh at that. I used to think it was just agenda driven persecution of hippies, but or black people as the narrative goes. But as having like that was the thing. It was black people smoke weed, so we need to crack down on that. But but having some edibles, man, it was an ordeal. It was a bad time.
It is proven that it causes schizophrenia. Not in everybody,
really,
but
one of those things where if you're predisposed to it or whatever, that it draws it out.
It brings it. Bring it on, baby. Bring it on.
I can see that.
So I mean,
I've had some friends with some.
It's pretty freaking dangerous
experiences to it.
Yeah. So satanic.
That's a hell of a segue, because like I've got massive libertarian opinions on that. But
I think a whole show should be dedicated to that. And I think it'd be fun. Maybe in person, drunk and high.
So we are going to do the.
So for those that
I have security clearance. I will not be high.
We will be in the next few weeks. We will be the three of us will be in the same zip code, and so we're going to be recording a couple. So you're going to see a different format for a couple.
We're going to be in the
episodes.
same room.
Yeah. But my point is, we're going to be in the same zip code for another reason, and so we're going to do a couple of episodes, and so you're suddenly going to see a different format. Don't get comfortable with it, because it won't be the ongoing format, but we'll hopefully try to do it a couple of times, and it'll have a different energy, and
until the Civil War happens and we have to rally to our staging area.
Well, then we'll just continue to do our show, and we'll be the voice of the liberation, right?
The resistance. Right. Yeah.
So if
you're listening to this,
sufficiently described what the moral panic about Satan is, and kind of the cautionary tale of some of this stuff is actually freaking real.
I feel like there's a bow to put on this, right? Like we talked about it and we got into the Pizzagate and then we kind of went off on some tangents. But I think, Brian asked a couple of questions because Dre, you kind of started and told a lot of the backstory, and then Brian kind of pushed back on a couple of things. I think a good kind of wrap up thought might be this. Just because things, how do I want to say this? Evil can hide in plain sight. Let's start with that, right? And I think that's the real cautionary tale, is that real evil hides in plain sight. And what does that mean? Somebody that's not familiar with that phrasing, it means it doesn't have to carry the moniker or have scary red horns and a pitchfork and a spiked tail to be evil, right? Things you might be normalizing or conditioned to or habituated to or numb to could be evil. And it could be the work of the actual devil to create these panics and then have them debunked. Because then everybody goes, oh, okay, well, if that's not true, then I guess the devil's not really around and we don't need to worry about it. Let's all go back to our regularly programmed station. So, if you think about it in that sense, it's almost a Kaiser Soze kind of moment, right? Where you were so worried about the big evil, and then you find out that it's not what you thought it was, but you didn't realize that he was actually pulling the strings of all of the things that were happening from the beginning. And that's a movie reference. And if you don't know the movie reference, I don't know that you should continue to watch this show.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You don't belong here.
You don't belong here. You're a commie who hates America. So,
but no, I joke because I guarantee a certain Michael Moore just heard me say that and goes, son, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Dad, go watch the movie The Usual Suspects.
At first I thought you were talking about
the big fat director.
Yeah. And I'm like,
that cat's easily seen it.
Like, that guy does not listen to our podcast. But then I'm like, all right. Yeah.
The good Mike Moore, not the commie Mike Moore.
Right.
But no, go watch The Usual Suspects.
Yes, I did.
Bro, I know 5 fat people, and Michael Moore's 4 of those 5.
You know what I'm saying?
And he ate the other one.
Yeah. Again, the movie director, Michael Moore, not you, Dad.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of my wrap up on this, right? Is I think, and that was kind of what I wanted to explain coming into this show was, we have these moments where we get worried about things, Pizzagate, and everybody was worried about it. Is it real? And they're like, well, like Brian said, there's no basement, so Pizzagate must be fake. Well, it wasn't, right? Like, it got over sensationalized. D&D was probably never really a conduit to the devil. That's not to say that children that are ostracized and kind of, sequester themselves from normalcy and start acting really strange shouldn't be checked in on by their parents.
Right. There's even a couple of murder cases where people, their D&D crew, because that's where they met all the time, and they actually plotted the murder of his stepdad because he had money, and they're like, you know what, we should actually talk about this. But it's not because they played, they used their game.
They happened to be playing, right? Yeah.
And this is a pretty good tee up. If we talk about the things that we've planned on for the next couple of weeks, it's a pretty good tee up for our next couple podcasts. But the bow that I would put on this is that I agree with everything you guys said, most of what you guys said.
But I was going to leave him some wiggle room. I got to make sure I didn't say everything, because you guys say some stuff I don't agree with. You guys say some filth. Filth.
Exactly. But some of what you just said, I agree with. But like what you just said, I agree with. But I 100% believe that satanic ritual abuse is a thing that has happened and is happening. But at the same time, along the lines of what we're talking about, the devil isn't always where you expect him to be. I would say you have more to fear from the devil from the pulpit of your own church than from Dungeons and Dragons. Or
that's a spicy take. I like that.
But yeah, I was gonna say, it's not a hot take; it's a spicy take.
I will back that up in the weeks to come.
Yeah, no, I dig it. I think that's
very cool.
I think that's solid. Yeah.
I think by people reporting thousands of rituals and abuse across the nation is the reason why we can't find the 20 that actually happened. And that's too bad. And 20 is an arbitrary number. It could be 100, could be 500, but it's not thousands and thousands in every town all the way across America for the last 30 years.
I don't think the population of
right.
those towns would, unless everybody in the town is a Satanist. But
which sounds like some kind of like Black Mirror episode
or a
Twilight Zone,
a Quentin Tarantino movie about a truck stop and vampires.
Yeah, like this movie took a weird turn. I love tequila all of a sudden, and feet for some. I don't know why.
That was Andre, not Matt.
Like, you don't like feet and tequila?
I like Selma Hayek in the 90s.
I mean, I was trying to say Selma Hayek without saying Selma Hayek, but thanks for decoding me, detective. So
it was, it took.
You must be Batman.
It took some sleuthing, but I figured out you were talking about
people against goodness and normalcy. PAGAN. Pagan. Nice work, Joe. Nice work.
I'm Joe.
People,
I'm Joe.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Paft. People against feet in their tequila.
I don't think
I am not one of those people.
I cannot be against Salma Hayek. I'm not gonna lie.
Even cheap tequila, I don't even care, man. You put some Cuervo Silver on there, and I'm good.
I fell in love in that moment, and I wanted to be Quentin Tarantino, even though I knew he had a big hole in his hand. He was probably gonna die. Like
did he have a hole in his hand at that moment?
Yeah, he got shot through the hand pretty early in the movie. He had some duct tape over it.
I mean, duct tape cures everything, so I don't think he's gonna die. Not from that.
So does tequila.
Right, tequila and duct tape.
You're
and
good.
Salma Hayek.
He was a serial killing, like delusional pedophile.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure having Salma Hayek appear in the way she did, I think that would have fixed him. I think that would have because
Salma Hayek cures Pizzagate. That's what that does. I don't know.
The world needs more
Salma Hayek.
Salma Hayek. Yeah.
We are way off the rails.
Yeah, I was just thinking how this was what I was planning on talking about, but
I have seen her in person.
Yeah.
All dolled up.
Did you mention me?
I wasn't paying attention if she did.
No, did you mention me? Did you like, hey, I got a buddy?
No, I was clearly speechless. I mean, it's not my fault. You understand.
No.
But she's one of the people that looks better in person than in any photo that you've ever seen. Any film, picture, in person, she's actually stunning. So, like, I was stunned. That's why I couldn't mention you, Brian, because the presence alone. Better.
He intended to, but then he didn't.
I came up like, hey,
you could have changed my life in that. I mean, you could have been like.
I wish I did.
I wish you did too.
You know who else looks way better in person? J-Lo.
I mean,
Jennifer Lawrence. I was surprised. I was like, that's weird. I'm not even. She's not even any kind of my flavor at all. And then,
I can almost get behind you, but then I hear her talk in interviews, and it's like the AOC effect.
I don't think she's that. I hear her talk in interviews, and I'm like, were you a WM?
Jennifer Lawrence?
Yeah. Like the way she tells stories, I'm like, did we party together in Pensacola or something? Like, you seem, she just is different the way she's
for the listeners. A WM means woman Marine,
and it's so derogatory. We don't use that language around here anymore, Marines.
Well, we never.
We don't say Wookiee, and we don't say.
I never said Wookiee. I felt like
me either. To be, I was being silly.
I never called anyone
my lady
a
audience. I never said that. I never said the word.
I never called anyone a Wookiee.
Jen Kozar's out there, right? Did anybody ever call you a Wookiee? I don't remember that word ever being used.
I don't think anyone would have called her a Wookiee.
I'm saying
Like a
was she
Wookiee.
aware of
Wookiee
it
has
being
a
her?
certain connotation.
Right.
Hairy, stinky.
Yeah.
Makes weird noises.
Also amazing in person. Angela Bassett, Queen. It doesn't matter how old she is. She's ageless. She's a fucking vampire. And Nicole Kidman. It's a good kisser. Just so you know.
And
I did not mention you. I took her all to myself. It was yes, Nicole Kidman kissed me and called me sweetheart and gave me a hug. She smelled very nice and she was super tall. I had to get on my tippy toes. And she wore those damn heels. I'm like, I'm looking
tippy
up.
toes. Your tippy toes.
On my tippy toes.
What are you, a 12-year-old little girl?
She leaned down to me.
She's
really that tall?
Did she sweep you off your feet, Dre?
So I think she's allegedly 5'11".
And then she was in like
she's
6
in heels,
heels or whatever. Yeah.
I gotta say, Tom Cruise as a weak little guy, that's pretty. I admire that. Like,
yeah, until and then Katie Holmes, like
he was killing it for the Short Kings.
Talk about mid. Katie Holmes. I'm sure she's a nice lady. I'm sure she's great.
I've always thought Katie Holmes was very attractive.
Very attractive, or just cute.
I found her very attractive.
I think mid is apt.
Mid. I mean, like there's people in my daily life that look better than her by far. So I have expectations for actresses.
I mean, I don't.
I'm being so misogynist right now.
So, I
think we just got canceled.
Yeah. Plus, I don't think she's a talented actress. On top of that,
I was really disappointed when she didn't return for The Dark Knight.
I mean, superior actress, but not good looking either. Her brother's hotter than her. Who? Miss Gyllenhaal. Maggie.
Oh, you're talking about Maggie Gyllenhaal. I thought you were talking about Katie Holmes.
Well, she replaced Katie Holmes, right?
Yeah, she did.
Well,
she did.
I thought you were following along here.
I was. I mean, right. Yeah.
But she's a superior actress to Katie.
She's a good actress. Yeah.
By far, like it's not even freaking close. But Jake Gyllenhaal is actually better looking than her.
I found Maggie Gyllenhaal attractive.
Have you seen him lately for that fighting movie he did?
You mean Roadhouse?
He's freaking huge.
That's Roadhouse. He better be if he's going to do Patrick Swayze.
He was bigger than Patrick Swayze when he woke up before he started
doesn't matter.
training. What are you talking about?
Awesome. And if you free ball 501 button fly jeans and you have a mullet, then you're a winner. Okay.
I think Patrick Swayze was.
I've done that before.
Patrick Swayze was the
but I've done that.
Man on earth who could pull that off.
Right.
I did.
It's a terrible, awesome movie. That's an awesomely terrible movie.
It's a really bad movie, but
it's really bad.
But I can't not watch it. I'm embarrassed while I'm watching it that I'm watching it. It's terrible.
I don't think it's bad. I think it's appropriate for the era.
It was made purposely like that. So therefore, it accomplished its mission.
It was an 80s movie. Like they were all like that. There were no 80s movies that were just like standout awesome, except like The Godfather 2. Like, I mean, that era of movies, there was a certain amount of 80s that just found its way into it. I don't know how to describe it.
Made it awesome.
Hey, are we still in the show?
Yeah. Dre hasn't signed off yet.
All right. This is what we're doing now.
Everyone's like, what does this have to do with Satan and panicking?
It's funny.
I
made a comment to my dad when I was in San Antonio, and I was like, what's funny is we don't, obviously everybody knows by now, we don't highly structure the show, but I've kind of figured out that our threshold is about 2 hours, but we always know we've hit the threshold when we start talking about movies and pop culture. And we do it in every episode at some point. Our brains just tap out and we just start talking about movies and being regular dudes.
No, we just revert to when we were kids hanging out.
Exactly.
And we're like, all right, we're done working. Let's
exactly.
Work day is over. Let's chill out and play Mortal Kombat.
I think all three of us did tie a bow on a.
We did.
We did. So
yep.
So if you're still here, thank you. Thank you for being here, and hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, help the algorithm out, share the show with your friends, and stay enlightened, stay curious, and we will see you next week. God bless.
Oh yeah, and check out my hip hop album.
Out at the devil.
Shout, shout.